Okay, so we have 827 patients, right? And they talk about a 12.6% miscarriage. But a miscarriage of those 827, 700 of those mothers had their vaccine in the third trimester. That's way beyond the window when a woman has a miscarriage. So they artificially took those 700 patients and put them in the first trimester. No, the 104 patients that had the miscarriage, that goes to the 127. 104 over 127, you're looking at a 82% miscarriage. So the key is the percentage of women that got the vaccine in the first trimester had an 82% miscarriage. And by the way, that's the exact same miscarriage rate that was seen in the Pfizer 5.3.6 post-marketing.
So I would argue that proves both points in the title of this hearing: the corruption of science, the corruption of federal health agencies.
Listen, I'm cognizant of the fact that you're kind of outnumbered here. So I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that if you want to. You don't have to.
All tragic, and I would obviously defer to ACOG, the American College of OBGYNs, who did, and they should come and testify too, who did GYN. I'm speaking as an ER physician and as a governor, but I'm sure that would be a vibrant.
The next point, in one of our events, some of you were there, there's Dr. Moon opened up the insert for everything on VAERS. I would think somewhere, when you take a look at the actual studies and the adverse events that were documented with informed consent with this COVID injection. I just think that's indisputable. I'll start with you, Dr. McCulloch. Do you want to weigh in on that?
I've presented at the FDA advisory meetings. I've advised companies for decades on this, so I know that results in death. As of today, they don't. And so Americans are not fairly informed.
Do you have any doubt in your mind that the COVID injection caused some death?
All the deaths we examined, and of these cases that came in for autopsy after vaccination, 73.9% of individuals, it was determined that the vaccine was the cause of death. First author is Holscher and colleagues. He's sitting right behind me.
And again, by FDA's own laws, that should be included on that package insert, correct?
Immediately in 2021, Dr. Carol Tossetta, working with the Daily Cloud, wrote Peter's Marks in the summer of 2023 and said, "Where's the black box warning? Where is it?" No word from Marks.
Dr. Vaughn, you want to weigh in on the informed consent?
Well, the other thing is, I think emergency use authorization, actually by definition, when you fill out the documents for the patient, if they read it, it actually says that they should make sure that they are under no compulsion to get this product. And that is what's so confusing, because even though the product was mandated in the summer, at the end of the summer of 2021, the product on the shelves was still the EUA product. And in that sense, for somebody to be mandated to something that they also have to sign to say that they weren't mandated to do it is kind of hard to do legally.
By the way, that's the subject of a couple oversight letters in terms of the whole full authorization type of thing. Dr. Thorpe, quickly?
Yes, on informed consent, there was completely the opposite in pregnant women. HHS appears to have captured the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and my research team, including Maggie Thorpe, JD, have proven that with the Freedom of Information Act.
For a few million dollars, correct?
Many $1 million. They captured ACOG. In December of 2020, everybody at ACOG and the other organizations, we're not going to push this vaccine in pregnant women. In the span of a pregnancy, 40 weeks, September 27th, 2021, you will push the vaccine. You will push it in pregnant women and follow all the HHS criteria. And if you don't, we will destroy you
and your professional career will take your license away and we will decertify you. That went out to 60,000 OBGYN doctors. So
So we probably should have expanded the title of this, corruption of science, federal health agencies, you know, what would you call those? Professional organizations?
these are the three organizations that essentially govern obstetrical care, not just in the United States of America, but the whole
By
world.
the way, I wanted to ask you, to what extent are the medical journals funded by various conflicting organizations, pharmaceutical companies? I've heard Chinese interests. I mean, are you aware of that? You were talking about the article written by the editors of the New England Journal of Medicine.
Yes, I'm aware of the study by Wen and colleagues, David Daniel Wen, that was just published October 10th of 2024, documenting that 1.06 billion with a B dollars went to the reviewers of the medical journals, of probably the most influential medical journals, New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, BMJ.
And that's coming out of the pharmaceutical industry.
That's correct.
So Dr. Walscott, as a vaccine injured, do you believe you received informed consent?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, informed consent, and I, as a physician, I believe strongly in informed consent. Informed consent requires true and transparent data. And we can sit here and hear the mantra or the typical narrative of safe, effective, saved millions of lives, but in reality, that's not true. Okay? We can talk about efficacy if we want. Again, certainly the vaccines don't prevent infection, don't prevent transmission. I think I could present to you, I mean, and refer to a lot about safety data, particularly with regards to all the adverse events that I think there's more than ample evidence that the federal regulatory agencies ignored. A lot of these systems, VAERS, V-Safe, I call deliberately deficient by design. So do I think I got informed consent? No. Do I think anyone here in the United States?
I kept seeing other crypto traders online saying how much they love Kraken and how fast it is. So I finally decided to give it a go.
I don't have the, proof. It's hard to prove these things. But my guess is the reason they were so concerned about issuing a warning on the Han is, again, they didn't want any vaccine hesitancy on this, right? And also, if they alerted doctors to the fact that if you have a patient with myocarditis, you might want to ask them, did you just get a vaccine recently? And otherwise, the doctor is looking at myocarditis trying to figure out how to treat it, right? Not trying to figure out the cause, because myocarditis does happen. Dr. McCullough, quickly.
Myocarditis was so common that in the UK and Australia, they actually did issue guidelines to doctors on how to recognize it and when to get MRIs. That's how big a problem vaccine myocarditis is.
Also, one of the points I made is they did not warn, they didn't advise doctors to advise against strenuous physical activity, right? They pulled that off of the one warning that they gave. Talk about how dangerous that is. The mild. Talk about how often myocarditis is mild versus serious.
Before the pandemic, there was myocarditis. Can be caused by Coxsackie virus. The most dangerous type is called giant cell myocarditis. It was very rare. I had seen 2 cases in my career. One was fatal. But it's in our guidelines. Anyone who develops myocarditis cannot undergo strenuous physical activity. They have to be taken out of sports. It's mandatory because the surge of adrenaline when there's inflammation in the heart triggers a cardiac arrest. So you can imagine how reckless it was for the sports teams to mandate vaccines on athletes, provide no provision of safety, and then have them go out on the field.
So why would these federal health officials, when they're discussing putting that warning, that advisory for physicians as they did their kind of weak need warning on myocarditis, what does that tell you? Why would they pull that out?
It was reckless not to provide prudent guidance on reducing the risk of cardiac arrest when a patient has vaccine myocarditis. Whether it's acute myocarditis that we clinically recognize, by the way, 90% are young men, 90% are hospitalized. Tracy Hogan, others at UCSD show that, multiple studies, but there's a larger group of subclinical myocarditis. These are patients with heart palpitations, blood pressure swings, atypical chest pain. Listen, this is water under the bridge. Fortunately, very few people are taking COVID shots anymore, but these patients still have symptoms. A recent report by Koyosmu in Journal of the American College of Cardiology has shown cardiac arrest in people years after the vaccines, and they have found vaccine microscars in the heart.
And we can keep going down this. I did want to go to Mr. Siri, who does a really good job of describing V-Safe, because you actually had to sue. You should have had to sue, by the way, right? First of all, the health agencies who set up this V-Safe, voluntary online report on specifically the COVID-19 injection safety surveillance, right?
Yeah, V-Safe.
10 million people signed up voluntarily. You would think the federal health agencies would make that information just available anyway, but at a minimum, when you FOIA'd it, Freedom of Information Act, you think they would have just handed it over to you, right? They didn't do that, did they? You had to sue them. How long did it take you to actually get that V-Safe data? And then why don't you describe what you've got and why they were probably trying to hide it?
Sure, it took over 2 years, and you'd also think with a name like V-Safe, it would have been designed to actually assess safety with regards to the COVID-19 vaccine. So V-Safe is a program that the CDC rolled out in December of 2020, along with the first rollout of the first COVID-19 vaccines. And as you just pointed out, Senator, the point was to ask people to sign up. 10 million Americans signed up, almost all of them in the first 6 months. This was when there were no mandates. These were folks who were enthusiastic about getting the vaccine. These were the folks who who felt it was their civic duty. In fact, that's part of what they checked of why they signed up for V-Safe. And so over the next 2 years, the CDC kept putting out study after study after study, dozens of them, in which it said the COVID vaccine is safe. When you look at those studies, what is it relying upon? One of the primary data sets it's relying upon is the V-Safe data, okay? And so on behalf of our client, ICANN, we, as you pointed out, submitted a Freedom of Information Act to the CDC, and we said, hey, this data you're collecting in V-Safe is almost all de-identified, because most of it's checked the box. Please provide it. The American public pays for it. You're public servants. American public should have access to it, should be able to do what scientific inquiry is supposed to do, which is replication.
By the way,
Yes.
quickly, what did they ask and what didn't they ask on the V-Safe?
Yeah,
I mean,
so,
talk how grossly inadequate it was.
yeah. So, I mean, I understand this hearing's about, did our public health agencies do things that were improper? Did they have scienter? Did they purposefully do things improper? And when you look at how V-Safe was designed, I think you'll see that. So V-Safe had check-the-box most of what V-Safe collected was via check-the-box options. Then it had some free text field. There were two categories of check-the-box options. The first category were symptoms. So you could check the box for various symptoms, right? And
Like, maybe give us an example.
fever, local, little pain.
The standard minor things, right?
Right. And so those symptoms, the V-Safe system only asked you for the first 7 days after injection. And as Dr. Shimabukuro even said in an email that we obtained via FOIA, those are the expected reactions. It's what they call almost immunogenicity. It shows the vaccine is working. And so the symptoms that they picked were totally useless for assessing the safety of the COVID-19 vaccines. And in fact, when you look at the studies that the CDC published, people were reporting those symptoms at 40, 50, 60% of them. Yeah, they reported, pain in the arm, of course. But they were viewed as normal to have a little chill, have a little fevers. And so that part of V-Safe was totally useless for assessing safety. So that wasn't useful. What was left? The only other thing that was checked the box was if you sought medical care, if you missed school or work, or if you were unable to perform normal daily activities, and if you checked that you missed, you needed medical care, it then asked you, were you hospitalized, emergency room, urgent care, or telehealth, okay? So that was the data they were collecting. So presumably, V-Safe was gonna assess safety by looking at people who sought medical care after vaccination, because everything else they collected on check the box was, at least on the symptoms, was not useful. Now, before I go on to tell you what the healthcare seeking data showed, I just want to go back to the symptoms that the CDC chose. One of the things that we obtained was a copy of the very first version of the design documents for creating vSafe. And when you go to the last page of that design document, it's in my 66-page submission. Everything I'm saying is in the 66-page position with citations and support. What you will see is they had a table. It was called Adverse Events of Special Interest, Pre-Specified Medical Conditions. And on that list, it had myocarditis, it had pericarditis, it had all of the issues that we now see and people have reported with regards to COVID-19 vaccine. It was in their design document before they launched vSafe, but not a single one of those conditions ended up as a check the box, or at least the symptoms of those conditions. You could have put in at least chest pain if you didn't want to use the word myocarditis or pericarditis, but they didn't do that. To me, that is the best evidence, one of the best pieces of evidence out there that our federal health authorities knowingly, consciously chose to design this system. It was not to determine safety. It was in order to assure their a priori assumption of safety. At the end of the day, CDC is a government agency. In my experience, they don't conduct themselves based on what folks would call science or medicine. They are a policy organization. They set their policy, and then everything that they do has to conform with that policy, and their policy is safe and effective.
So again, voluntary system, 10 million people signed up.
Yes.
They've tracked all this data, inadequate, check the box information.
Not only inadequate,
and what they should have been just making available online, like quite honestly, like VAERS. I mean, VAERS available. You can see it. Okay.
They should have.
They should have made that available as well. They didn't, and so you had to sue. When did you sue them?
Sued them. It would have been a few months after the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine. And
Okay,
it took us a
so
year
early
and a half.
early in 2021.
It took us 2 lawsuits actually, because we in order to make them take contradictory positions, and only so we sued them 2 different ways, and only when they had no choice, they finally released the data after
And
a year and a half.
you first filed a FOIA request.
Yes.
And they should have just boom, they should have handed it over to you.
If
Right?
they want
because
to be
they obviously
transparent.
were collecting this data, had to be kind of centralized. Wouldn't have been that big a task, I wouldn't think. To okay, here's what the data shows.
It would have
us.
taken them seconds.
They should have, by law, should have just turned it over to you,
They should have.
and they didn't. So you had to go to court, and it took you 2 years.
It took it.
Okay, then so now drum roll.
Yes.
What did the vSafe data show once you finally extracted it by a lawsuit using the courts?
Yes.
What did they show you about how safe the
Here's
COVID
what
injection was?
Here's what it showed. In contrast to the dozens of studies that the CDC relied upon to say that COVID-19 vaccines were safe using vSafe data, where they only reported the first week of what people reported after the injection seek medical care, even though they know that injuries from COVID vaccine can happen well after the first week, but they only reported the first week to make the number look low. And even though they designed the system to collect medical seeking behavior for 6 weeks after getting the vaccine and 3 more instances after that, when we got the data, it showed that 7.7% of vSafe users reported needing medical care after the COVID-19 vaccine. And 75% of those reported they were hospitalized, emergency room, or urgent care. And on average, they sought medical care 2 to 3 times each. All of this data is publicly available now. And so if you're asking...
And by the way, and a quarter missed a day of work, which, by the way, Thomas Bakura, in a video before the emergency use authorization about the safety surveillance system, said, we're going to take this so seriously. If somebody loses a day of work, we're going to have a CDC official on the phone following up, checking it out. Was that your experience, Dr. Walskog?
Absolutely not.
Not exactly. Did you want to say anything else about that? I know I've been kind of stomping on you.
No, not at all. No, it's just this. When they designed vSafe, the only data that probably could have assessed safety was medical seeking behavior. So you would hope our federal health agencies had a number. Look at how, how often COVID itself injured people.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform.
Sought medical care, they pulled the plug. 1 in 100 people reported seeking medical care vSafe, then they'd pull the plug. The data showed 1 in 13 people sought medical care on average 2 to 3 times each. I don't think there was a number, unfortunately, that would have been sufficient for CDC to pull the plug.
So what we sought for years is their analysis of errors. The proportional reporting ratio, which they did release some of those through FOIA to news organizations, that type of thing, not particularly useful. And by the way, they didn't particularly like that statistic anyway, so they did empirical Bayesian analysis. Never got it. Over a year, never got it.
Well, we have
Why?
2 federal lawsuits still going on right now for
Why?
the EB data.
Okay, now we're starting to get some of it. Okay, and again, I don't want to steal thunder or jump the shark on things that I know about that are being studied, but I think it'll be shocking to people to realize that they definitely had signals in empirical Bayesian that they were not reporting. And it will show. It's kind of complex, but this will be shown.
Well,
Okay, so that's what I say. They say, well, you're not proving the case on this myocarditis. No, this is the tip of the iceberg, of the cover-up, of the downplaying, and you have to ask why. Governor, just this story, were you aware of the story of VSafe?
Through the testimony, I should probably be allowed to comment. There's been a lot of comments, and we talk about commenting and so on, because I'm pretty outnumbered here. Look, the couple things. First of all, VAERS, all right, which has been mentioned a bunch of times. It's not an adjudicated reporting system. It's valuable to get input, which we're grateful for, but it is a flood of experience, and there is no, there's no clear causal connection. No, I see your numbers, but that doesn't.
Did that cause you concern?
No, it didn't. I'll tell you why. Because we do want input, massive input. I'm grateful that there were people putting that in there. But that's why we do science and studies. We don't just do what this is.
I'm going to argue with you here, okay?
Fine.
Here's the problem, because I was going to go down this road. They didn't see safety signals because they didn't want to see them. They had them. They wouldn't report on them. They lied to us. That's what I'm trying to get at. They lied to us, just like they lied and said, this thing's going to stay in your arm, when they knew it wouldn't, and we know conclusively it does not. They talked about the mRNA. This can just, it's going to go in there, stay in the arm, it's going to dissolve, in hours, couple days, whatever. But they knew it wasn't mRNA, it was modified RNA, and it stayed in the body, together with the spike protein. And we have studies of that. They're not talking about that as they continue to push this. So again, they've lied to us. So again, you can keep saying that, follow the science. No, the science has been corrupted and the agencies have been corrupted. So we have not been able to believe in them. That's why they have no credibility.
I'm entitled
Go
to
ahead,
answer
Governor.
many of these things. So we certainly disagree on a lot of things, okay?
Yes.
One of them is that you say corrupted and corruption, and that is possible, okay? But I didn't have that. I'm just sharing with you as a doctor and a governor and a public health officer and who had a great response for our state. We didn't have that experience. We did have a great...
By the way, I have checked other island nations and stuff.
Go ahead, check them.
Be interesting.
We were advising them. They were calling me for advice, and that's why we did safe travels, like the senator bristled at. We did actually find ways to help people know whether or not they had COVID, whether or not they'd spread it, whether or not people were at risk. We did that work, okay? Other people may have been, not doing that work. I don't know if anybody in this room did that work. I did the work, okay? I was out there saving lives either in the ER or as a lieutenant governor. Everyone else is talking about corruption, okay? I was doing the work.
We had doctors that had the courage to treat COVID patients as well. So.
Yeah, and I was a COVID patient also and in isolation for 14 days. And it was the right thing to do at the time, September 11th of the first year, because we didn't know if I would spread it to my children or to my wife or to other people that I cared deeply about or my constituents. So I honored it, unlike others might not have, okay, being in quarantine. So that's a different topic. Now, we've talked about myocarditis a lot, okay? And we are going to differ in our opinions about the data, I'm sure. However, there were about 12 cases from one perspective per million second shots. That's one of the studies and reports. I'm sure other gentlemen at this table are going to dispute that and have disputed that completely. But I will tell you that we saw one heck of a lot more terrible cardiac issues, myocarditis, far more clots for people that ended up in the ICU that we had to treat. We saw cataclysmic numbers when people got bad COVID and ended up at the hospital, but they didn't get bad COVID when they got vaccinated. That is the point. Now, we're walking past,
So again,
a lot of those issues.
Okay, can you cite the study that proves that?
Yes, and I'm
Okay,
happy.
so provide them. I
Of
mean,
course
if you can't,
we, of course we will, and you can get, there's another 24,000 pages of data on both sides of this argument, okay? And everybody knows that the colossal damage to human
again,
beings.
will you provide this committee that
Of course
study?
we will. And all of the data, nationally and internationally, showed that people had these complications in much larger numbers from severe COVID than they did from vaccinations, much larger numbers. Now, we can have that debate, and we'll get you at plenty of studies, okay? And the studies will be, he's shaking his head, but that's what the vast body of mainstream researchers and mainstream healthcare providers feel. Now, I don't want to disparage my colleagues that are up at this table, okay? But I will tell you that we are going down a rabbit hole to demonize the vaccinations. And maybe someday we will find that there should have been more transparency. Maybe people will find ultimately, that vaccines cause more harm than people were able to report at the time. However, it's my firm belief as a provider of healthcare and a person who had to make a state plan that there is value in providing vaccinations like this. And next time we have a pandemic, it's going to be even more serious if it ever affects children. I will tell you, people are going to clamor for vaccinations if children are terribly affected. And the country, you think it was shut down before, it's going to be shut down 50 times worse. We worked to open the state. That was a misrepresentation by the good senator from Ohio. We worked to open the schools and open the state by just making sure people had a test so they were negative. It helped us. And we didn't force people to get vaccinated if they wanted to travel. And I didn't support mandates, just so you know the truth.
That's fine.
Right. So a lot of this, of course, is tilted very heavily to demonize this vaccination and the process. And I respect if the data comes out and shows that, or someone covered up, I respect that.
So I will say the COVID cartel was tilted very strongly to demonize these people, okay? To vilify them, to offer retribution. So no.
But you just called them a cartel. You don't think that's demonizing somebody?
So there's no doubt this panel is definitely tilted toward one side, but the vast majority of the media and the agencies and everything else are tilted toward the one side, and that's what's so frustrating. The reason we'll have a tough time the next pandemic is because our federal health officials and the media lied to us, and we have proof they lied to us, and we have proof that they went and they used the power of the federal government to have social media companies censor people. Dr. Walskog, I do want to cover this because this is egregious, and people committed suicide because of this. But talk about how Facebook, after our event in Milwaukee, talk about how Facebook repeatedly shut down the support groups for the vaccine injured. That was their only lifeline because they could not get help. They weren't believed. They only had each other. And so they had these Facebook groups, and Facebook shut them down, and people lost contact, and people committed suicide because of it.
Yeah, so this is now earlier in 2021 when there was just a couple of isolated people across the country early on. For example, Breanne Dressen, who's my co-chair at React 19, she was injured during the AstraZeneca trial, so very much in the fall of 2020. And early on after that episode, she started communicating with some other people across the country, and her husband has some connections out at the NIH. That group started communicating with Dr. Nath, who is a neurologist at the NIH, who clearly confirmed that these injuries were vaccine-related. These people started giving each other support, really. What do we do? What do we do? Communicated with Senator Johnson's office. And in the end, they had a press conference in June of 2021 in Milwaukee. And the idea of the press conference, again, don't let me speak for you, Senator, but was just to allow these people to be acknowledged and to communicate their story. Well, not only did the media show up and not cover their story, it turned into a hit piece basically on Senator Johnson. But more importantly, within 3 to 5 days after that press conference, all of those support groups that Breanne Dressen had set up were all shut down. And in retrospect, they found out that through the White House communication office, who was communicating with another contractor who was following her, and they directly through the White House communication office shut all those groups down. And you might say, well, it's too bad they can't communicate with each other. No, some of the people were suicidal and subsequently killed themselves. So this resulted in.
And Governor,
this is
again, I've heard you say, that's, and we should never do that, and it's regrettable and all kind of stuff, but that's what happened. It happened repeatedly. It's still happening.
Look, let me support Dr. Walsog, okay, for a moment. Okay, first, I will be empathetic. It is terrible. And believe me, this is not anything that I would do. But let me just say this.
Tell you, Peter Marks didn't find it terrible because he's behind it.
Okay, well, but I do want to say that is terrible, and we should have open communication. However, that is not necessarily what I'm feeling. The love here in the hearing, okay? And mind you, I spent 14 years on your side of the desk, and I spent now 6 years on the other side as an executive. The truth is, it's always somewhere in the middle. People have their biases, and if it's true that the Biden administration, encouraged people to not share information, that's bad. But there was another president also that was encouraging the vaccinations. And so we had two presidents, one Republican, one Democrat, in fairness, who they promoted the vaccine. And so all this conversation about not sharing enough of the potential risks and so on, everyone, and I would say this, everyone, including you guys and us and these good people, we're all responsible as a society to do our best to communicate.
I'm pissed off right now. Yo, CEO, Joey.
Hey, Jake.
I heard
saying that word is explosive, okay? And
it was developed out of firsthand experience dealing with them.
Believe me, and I have plenty of words to share about the people that threatened my life many, many times because I was a public health official, not even in favor of the things they were threatening my life over. Many times. Had to send it to our attorney generals. I'll get you copies of that too, Senator, if you'd like, okay? Pretty awful stuff when they threatened my daughter's life. We have also an 18-year-old daughter, sir. And so that is the problem here. Now, I am appreciative of the process you're going through because we should look at the horrible episode, which is what COVID was, and do better in the future. But if it ends up being skewed to the demise or the suppression ultimately of vaccinations, which is what a large part of society is fighting to do, then we will all lose. So and again, that's why I'm speaking up.
What we're trying to do is restore integrity to science, which it has been corrupted. Again, you pay for science, you get the result you want. You got Fauci paying for science for 40 years, he's getting the result he wants. So again, I'm begging you, please provide the studies, the citations that prove that the injection actually reduced severity of symptoms, prevented deaths. Give us those studies so we can throw those in the hearing record and compare them to other studies like, for example, the Lassiter study or Lataster study that I did enter.
It will not be difficult, Senator. There's so many.
And again, listen, as I said, I'm well aware of the fact 5. I think I've given you a fair amount of time to respond and stuff, and I've tried to be respectful.
I'm used to talking a lot. It's okay.
We all are. It's an occupational hazard here, and we'll just prove it here, Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you. And I'll have to be quick because I have to actually go to the floor. I've just been at my other committee meeting. And I want to ask you a kind of yes or no question, Governor Green. HHS apparently is making plans to change the way that vaccines are approved, requiring placebo trials for vaccines that have been used previously for decades. In other words, the clinical trials on vaccines already in use will involve placebo trials. I understand a lot of doctors feel that this practice would be unethical. Do you agree?
Yes, that will be unethical.
Thank you.
And it will be unethical because we already have demonstration that people get protection. So it's unethical to give them a placebo and watch kids die of meningitis or diphtheria or polio. That's why it's unethical.
It's not unethical to study. It's not unethical to research. It's not unethical to run trials, but to possibly put people at risk when a particular vaccine has already been proven safe and effective and has been in use for decades, that would be unethical.
Correct, Senator.
Thank you. I want to ask Dr. McCullough, I understand that you are an executive of the wellness company, and that the wellness company has made money from the sale of supplements and other, quote, spike detox products. Is that correct?
I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of the Wellness Company, which is a national company started in 2022. It delivers healthcare, so it's a company of doctors. Also provides nutraceuticals and supplements, fully prescribes drugs across the range, health education materials.
How much money has your company made from the sale of spike detox products?
And the company has innovative products like spike detoxification based on peer-reviewed studies demonstrating the scientific underpinnings for a combined use of three over-the-counter nutraceuticals, which are nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. You can buy them anywhere on the internet if you want them. So the company, I don't have the company's balance sheet with me, but I can tell you its overall valuation right now is about $50 million with an M. And that pales in comparison to the tens of billions of dollars that the government spent on vaccines that have caused great harm. At the Wellness Company, we are trying to help the country recover, whereas further vaccination is putting the country into a big hole in terms of damaging their health care.
And your
Audience, please.
your company, that company also makes ivermectin? Ivermectin?
The company can prescribe, the doctors can prescribe ivermectin, they can prescribe Paxlovid, molnupiravir, they can prescribe any drug within the pharmacopoeia.
How much have been the profits from the sale of that drug since 2020?
Well, it's prescribed, so whatever pharmacy delivers it, like CVS or Walgreens, they would derive any profit.
I'm talking about profits for the company.
It can't, because they prescribe drugs to pharmacies. The pharmacies are the ones that people pay to get the medication.